All right, so mistake number one is defaulting to criticism. And this is one of the default habits. It's really easy when there's a performance issue to think about to criticize or to describe what went wrong. For most people, that actually doesn't have an impact on performance. Criticism is very important for when you're just beginning, for new hires when they don't know how. That's when criticism can have an impact. But even then, it can really it can diminish their self-esteem and have them not feel good. So it's one of those things where it is automatic to say, hey, this is wrong. This is what you need to do differently. But when you look at studies, what you know, or what they show is that if you are a mid-level performer or a top performer, what actually makes a bigger difference in performance is encouragement and praise. So if you really want to improve performance, using encouragement or praise will have a bigger impact. If you do, and criticism can be used, but it's important to have a coaching style relationship with that individual. Many managers make the mistake of thinking that because they're in that role and their role requires them to give feedback, it means that the coaching relationship has been established. But for the vast majority of the time, that's not the case. So having a specific conversation with the individual saying, I would like to be able to coach you to improve, and getting that permission can go a long way to having your feedback go from criticism to support. I have to apologize. Even though I put something in front of the door, my cat has made it in and he's attacking my blinds. So just one moment. This is Kuma. Kuma, you're now famous. All right. On your way, dude. Got to be able to roll with the punches in life. All right. So it's important to have that conversation to establish a coaching relationship, regardless of where your employees are in their cycle. But again, criticism early in someone's career or when they're just starting, that can have a positive impact on performance. But for everyone else, it likely will have a detrimental impact on performance. And I'm going to show this slide here because many managers really underestimate the ratio that's needed between praise and criticism. So again, another study from the Harvard Business Review, and it showed that the highest performing teams have a ratio of 5.6 praise encouragement conversations or positive interactions for every criticism. 5 to 1, more than 5 to 1. And so when you think about how often you're having positive conversations versus critical conversations, this should give you an inclination about the what it really takes to improve performance. So if you like that, throw a little thumbs up in the chat. If there's anything that was insightful, be like, wow, that was insightful. You don't need to, but if you do that, you get entered into the draw. Okay, number 2 mistake, misdiagnosis of root cause. It's natural for humans to have something happen and then to make a judgment about why it happened. It may or may not be right. And assuming you know why can waste a lot of time. I've had many owners or senior leaders come to me saying they just don't care. And that might be true. There might be an essence of that, but it's rarely the case that they don't care about doing a good job. There's usually a reason why it didn't happen. And when you don't take the time to understand the root cause, you might jump to giving feedback about something that is unnecessary. And not only that, will create frustration in the individual. They're trying to help me with this. That's not why it happened. And it just creates frustration and it does not improve performance. So taking a moment to figure out what is the root cause of the performance issue can have a big impact on your ability to actually have things get better. I like to teach my clients about the Mars model. I see Ivan smiling there. He likes that one. So Mars stands for motivation, ability, role perceptions, and situational factors. And when you can figure out where those fit, it can give you some support into the inquiry of what was the root cause of that issue. You can look up that on the internet, so I'm not going to dig into a deep training on that because otherwise we'll run out of time. All right, moving along. Mistake number 3. Most people are really good at this on the surface. They don't give personal feedback. However, in a moment, I'm going to share why this is actually way harder than you think. So the first thing is, as soon as you say you should or you didn't, so you say you did instead of this happened. When you make it personal, immediately there is a tendency for the person to become defensive. And when they become defensive, it's harder for them to hear what you have to say. So instead of you made a mistake, you might say, it seems like a mistake has happened or a mistake has occurred. Now it's not a personal conversation, it's a conversation about the mistake. Now here's why this is so hard. There's 2 key reasons. One is, if you think it's about them, like they're careless or they don't care or they're incompetent, even if you think that and don't say it, it will come across. That's called condemnation, where you assign a behavior as a character trait. So instead of you were being careless, you are careless. Now, saying that is one thing, and most people are, can stop themselves from saying that. They understand that that will do harm. But what most people don't understand is the level of communication that happens below our level of a consciousness. So there's a lot of community. So if you think that about someone, think they're incompetent or have condemned them in a certain way, they will get that, and it will make it harder for you to give them feedback and improve their performance. So it's really important as a leader to have the self-awareness to know when you have an opinion about how people are. And that's why this mistake is actually really hard not to do. Because as people, we say, well, they've been doing that for months, weeks, years, so that's how they are. It's not true. They may have been acting that way, but it's not who they are. They have the possibility of being different. And if you don't allow for that inside your heart and in your mind, it's way harder for them to be able to move into that new space. The other reason why this is hard is many top performers speak to themselves in a really harsh manner. They would say things like, oh, you idiot, why would you do that? You're better than that. And that actually works for them. And that's not me. If someone said that to me, I'd be like, what? But it actually works. And so sometimes top performers climb into leadership roles and they assume that how they speak to themselves is also what's going to motivate others. And what they don't understand is that a lot of top performers have trained themselves to be in action regardless of how they feel, or they have an unshakable confidence. They believe that they're going to get it done or that it's going to work out. But there's a whole slew of other people who actually have the sense of like, I'm not good enough. And when you make the criticism personal, they believe you. And what that does is it robs them of the energy they need to take action and be successful. As I said, not judging someone and allowing someone to have the space to grow into a different person is really hard to do, and is why leadership is one of those areas that takes some time to develop and takes some effort. It really isn't a default behavior. Number 4, uncontrolled emotions. I have had some leaders say they don't listen to me unless I'm angry. And it's true. When you yell or have a lot of emotion in your voice, people will react. Unfortunately, it doesn't necessarily inspire loyalty, and it actually makes you psychologically unsafe. People have fear and are worried when they're around you, and that can have a negative impact on their well-being. So that being said, I'm not saying do not share your emotions. I really believe in what Brene Brown talks about, which is when a leader is vulnerable and can share what their emotions or needs are, that has a big impact on creating a drawing type of encouraging people to act. It's just when you're in the throes of the emotion and you're not contained and you haven't had a chance to let them settle down, that's when it becomes dangerous for you to leap right into feedback. So if you are really upset and stuff happens that is really upsetting, take some time, wait till you're calmed down, and then lead into the conversation. You'll be way more likely to not say something that's going to impact your credibility or your relationship with that individual. Mistake number 5. Okay, so just going to check in. I've got 10 little messages in the chat, so hopefully people are enjoying this and doing a good job. We're zooming along, which was kind of the intention, and hopefully you guys are doing okay. All right. Mistake number 5 is inconsistent expectations. And this often happens when your expectations aren't written down or aren't easily repeatable. Like you haven't said them so many times, people just automatically say, you know, at Smith & Co, we always put the customer first. That's a pretty trite kind of saying, but that would be an expectation that people just say, you know, we have all the time in the world to do it right the first time, no time at all to do it again the second time. If they can't say that, then there might be expectations may not be clear. And it often happens where you know, a manager or a leader will say, I want you to do it this way. And then the person will be like, okay, and they do it that way. And then next time they do it that way, and the manager says, why did you do it that way? And they said, well, you told me to. And then the owner or the manager says, but I don't want you to do it that way this time. Like, it's just common sense. If you have found yourself saying it's just common sense, it's quite likely that expectations aren't clear. Because the reality is that there's no such thing as common sense. There is, you know, if you are all lawyers, if you're all construction workers and you've been in the industry for a while, there's kind of generally accepted ways of being. But a lawyer and a secretary, or, you know, they have a different approach to how they do things. And so thinking that there may be some common sense can really cause issues down the line. So that would create inconsistent expectations. All right. So if you have any questions, keep a note of them, make a note on the notepad. We're going to have a little time at the end. But when you exclaim, this is just common sense, you're actually making all the first 4 mistakes as well. there's uncontrolled emotions, you're making it personal, there's a misdiagnosis, and and just being critical. So that idea of common sense, so just put that aside, and you'll do much better in terms of giving performance feedback. All right, mistake number 6. No follow-up. Now, if you don't follow up on your feedback, then what can occur is that your employees or your team will be like Charlie Brown in the classroom, and you'll become like Charlie Brown's teacher. They'll understand that they need to listen to you for a period of time, but they don't actually have to understand what you're saying. It'll be like wah 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 wah, and they'll nod, and then they'll know they don't have to do anything about it because you don't follow up. Now, yes, there is a sentiment. We're all adults here. I've told you once, you should be able to remember and change your behavior. And sometimes that's true. Sometimes that can work. But for most humans, it takes time to change a behavior, especially if you've been doing something a certain way for time. So as a manager or a leader, if you can be a few reminders. Now, don't forget, when we're doing this, we do this. It may feel like irritating, that or like you're going to bother them, or you're treating them like children. But the reality is, it shows that this behavior is important to you, and it makes them focus. And if you do it the right way, it can actually occur like you're supporting them to do what you're asking them to do, and they will appreciate that. So following up or having some follow-up can go a really long way. Mistake number 7. No foundation of positivity. It is, again, a biological wiring for people to want to avoid pain. And when everything that you say is critical, as soon as you come around, you're going to encounter resistance. And remember that ratio of 5 to 1. What does it actually take to create a positive foundation? It's more than you think. And think about this from your personal life. If you're in the middle of an unhappy moment in your relationship with your partner or your kids, and then you try and give them some feedback or make things better, the result is almost always an argument. At least that's my experience. Perhaps you have some magic touch that I don't know about. And it's the same thing for your employees. If you haven't laid the groundwork for a positive foundation, when you give them feedback, it can often occur like, this is time for an argument. Now at home, your kids and your partner will argue with you out loud. But at the office, they'll argue with you silently or behind your back. So by taking the time to lay the foundation of positivity and having more positive interactions than non-positive, the chance of argument and resistance to your feedback is greatly, greatly diminished. And I just want to touch a moment about the happy relationship ratio. The Gottman Institute has been studying relationships for over 40 years. And what they observed is that in order to have a happy relationship, you have to have at least 5 positive interactions for every negative. And so by eliminating negative interactions, these mistakes that I'm talking, you actually make your life 5 times easier. So not only do you have to not have to do as many positive interactions, you also are eliminating some of those errors. So 5 times easier. All right, where am I at here? Yes. Oh, if you don't have the right ratio, it goes into what's called a negative forming Markov state. Why is it called that? I'm assuming some scientist named Markov came up with it. But what that means is that you easily enter into negativity or argument, and you have a hard time getting out. So if you want to know if your ratio is good, then what you'll notice is that the interaction easily gets into the negative, and then it kind of stays there. It doesn't feel natural to start doing positive things when your things are negative. Either the human side is like, well, I'm just going to be negative too, I'm going to ignore them. But that's why it's challenging to be a leader. You need to be able to overcome your automatic human instincts and act in a way that you know to do instead of maybe what you feel to do. All right, mistake number 8. The wrong reason for compliance. And this is actually pretty tricky to actually get right, because it really takes a bit of a leap of imagination. So the first thing is, when you make a request for a behavior change, what you're looking for is a promise of action on their part. But if the reason they comply is, hey, I'm your boss and you're supposed to listen to me, that doesn't necessarily create loyalty or better performance. Yes, they will do what you ask, but it doesn't, then you are the one who's driving their behavior, and you lose the opportunity to tap into their discretionary effort. And so it takes something to consider, like, the reason you want them to comply is hopefully something they care about. And this actually works in every relationship. I must admit, this is a hard one for my kids, because as their dad, I'm like, you should listen to me. But that's not why I want them to say yes to my request. I want them to say yes because I want to have a happy family, because it'll make it easier for us all to work together. Those are my needs, but I don't necessarily go to that next level. And so it's really easy to stop at the, I'm your boss, you're supposed to listen to me. But when you go to that next level and give them a reason, or help them find a reason that they care about, then you can really tap into a level of loyalty and caring that solves multiple problems. And so that's why having the wrong reason for compliance has a big impact. All right, saw a couple of thumbs up on that one, so thank you. Those are the 8 reasons. And let me just review them quickly. So defaulting to criticism, a misdiagnosis of the root cause, making it personal, having uncontrolled emotions, inconsistent expectations, no follow-up, no foundation of positivity, and the wrong reason for compliance. A high performance culture doesn't happen by default. It's really hard to do. And part of the reason for that is because our natural instincts as people often need to be overcome in order to be the kind of leader that inspires people into actions that we want. And that's just, that's, as we evolve as people, we'll be able to do some of those things. So some of these things you'll be like, I got that nailed, it's all good. Maybe there's 1 or 2 here you're like, oh, I could be better at that one. And so that's the evolution. But when you eliminate some of these mistakes, your conversations about performance will not only be more effective, they may be welcomed, because ultimately you'll be the reason why you're having that conversation. They will care enough to want to hear and get to that next level with you. Anything else I want to say about that? It really, chances are you're gonna make mistakes, and it's okay. It's not like you make this mistake, but when you do, and you can be vulnerable and take responsibility for that mistake. Hey, when I gave you that feedback, I was really angry and I didn't really control my emotions very well. I want to be responsible for that. That's not how I want to be as a leader. And that may have had an impact on you. When you can take responsibility for your mistakes, it actually has a net positive impact. But if you don't, then what can happen is you create lingering resentment that then prevents the desire, that number one, that desire to listen to your, to go to that next level. You may get people doing just enough not to get fired, but you don't necessarily get that discretionary effort where they're willing to go above and beyond to have you be successful. So now you know about some of those mistakes, but the reality is what I've learned in my consulting career is knowing is not enough. And in fact, learning something new can actually make it harder for you to take action. Our brains love the almost win. When we learn about something new, we begin to imagine a future where we're not making those mistakes or doing those things, and our brain goes, oh yeah, but it doesn't distinguish between reality and an imagined reality. And so we think we've already done it. Our brains feel like we've already done it. And so we don't take action. We go, oh, that was great. So we love learning more. And we could spend years, developing ourselves and learning more. And then when it comes to take action, very different thing. It's hard. And the reality is that people learn by, go ahead, put that in the chat. People learn by doing. Only new actions create new results. And so I just want to take a couple of minutes and talk about, what does it take to actually take action? All right, just checking the timer. Thank you for being with me here today, Violet. 42 minutes in. Hopefully this has been valuable for you. So we'll just take a couple more minutes and we'll do that draw for that book. It's one of my favorite books. It really had a profound impact on my communication style. So traditional programs look like this. There's 90% information, there's long training sessions, there's new processes and systems, and lots of personal change required. And when it comes to ongoing support, usually it's in the form of expensive coaching. These programs focus on knowing. Our education system is really focused on knowing. Now, of course, there's some great programs that are focused on doing, so I'm not going to disparage every single one out there, but many programs, you get an education and you know more, but it doesn't necessarily translate into different actions. And I'm sure as an organization, if you've had people go off to courses on customer service or leadership training, you've seen them, they go, yeah, I loved it. It was great. It was moving, but it doesn't necessarily translate into different actions. And that's just the way, because all that information fades over time. So I think what works to change behavior is actually flip that model on its head. You have 90% support. You have timely reminders. So you get reminded at the point of time when it's time to take action. Group support, so that when you see other people are doing it, hey, they can have the courage to share or to talk about themselves, or then I can do that too. And then daily encouragement, because motivation is not a constant. It fades over time. So when you have all of those things and it really focuses on the support, you're way more likely to take action. And then when you get easily consumable tips, like this presentation fed to you a little bit out of a time over the course of 30 days, each day a little tip, you're way more likely to say, oh yeah, today I'm focusing on not making this mistake. But right now you're like, I gotta not make the 8 mistakes. It's harder for your brain to be like, where's my action? So easily consumable tips delivered over time. And that's the focus on doing. And this is why it works that way. BJ Fogg is one of my favorite authors on behavior change. He's a Stanford professor. He's been studying behavior change for over 30 years. He created what's called the Fogg behavior model. And his assertion, based on his research, is that For an action to occur, you need three things to happen at the same moment. You have to have motivation, you have to have ability, and you have to have a trigger. Now, most of the time as humans, the trigger is unconscious, so we don't recognize that it's happened. But when you look at this chart, if you're highly motivated and it's easy and you have easy to take the action, when you have a trigger for action, you will succeed. If you're highly motivated, but it's hard to do, the trigger may still fail. So the goal is to keep motivation high and make the action easier. And when you can break down that action into tiny little micro habits, then it makes it easier to take action. And then when you have a reminder, you know you have the ability, you have the motivation, and action actually occurs. So that's the goal in a training program, keeping the motivation high and making sure that the actions you want people to take are super clear and easy to do. So there's no moment where they get triggered. They go, oh yeah, I'm going to appreciate the staff, or I'm going to be encouraging. And then they have to think about, how do I be encouraging? And then the moment's gone and no action occurred. But if they have, I'm going to be encouraging, and tell them how their character, their past character, their past results is going to make them easily achieve these results. So if they have that as a skill, they say, oh, right, here's what I say in this moment. So that's the key. That's why training programs can actually create action. So that's the little element of how do you go from knowing to doing. So that's kind of the problem I've been focused on fixing or solving. So I developed my own proprietary app, and it's designed to help people develop the new habits in just minutes per day, because people are busy and they're not getting less busy. So being able to do these actions in the in-between times, not doing more, but changing how you're doing what you're doing, that's what creates the better results. And that you don't need more time for that necessarily. There's a little bit of time, of course. So the next part here is, if you're interested, I'm just going to talk a bit about my program. I call it the Inspirational Manager Program. And if you're not interested, totally understand. But it'll only take a couple of minutes. I appreciate you listening in case you or someone down the road is interested. As I talked before, there's three core principles associated with being an inspirational manager. Principle number one is do no harm. And it requires advanced self-awareness beyond what is typical for what people are needing in regular course of life. Extraordinary listening, not only being able to hear what people are saying in terms of meaning, but also what is their intention, what are their needs behind what they're saying. And that really takes practice and requires some effort. Emotional mastery, the ability to understand that I have an emotion, where that emotion's coming from, how it's impacting me, and how it's impacting others. Understanding that process is very important to doing no harm. And when you do get triggered, no, I am triggered, like this is happening, and understanding what to do about that. Principle number two is influencing well-being. And again, I think this is so underrated, and why this is hard for organizations. They think that appreciation and encouragement and these positive interactions are unnecessary or aren't directly impacting success. They want to see things like, we got to have conversations about productivity and systems and technology, because those are immediate, and it's easier to draw a straight line between that and increased productivity. And yet study after study shows that when you have this positive environment, you're more productive, you're more profitable, you keep retaining your staff. And so it's really hard for people who are looking at the books to say this is what we want, but it is one of the best ways to do that. So again, teaching people how to give really meaningful appreciation, powerful encouragement, like how do you actually give people courage, give them more confidence, enabling productivity. Another key, like if people are frustrated because they have to do things 3 times and it just keeps going on and on, it has a big impact on their well-being. When you can solve some of those problems, like instead of having to go across the room to recycle something, you give them a recycle bin right beside their desk. It makes their life better, because how many times do they do that in a day? The last one, facilitating growth, no criticism coaching. We talked a bit about that today. Clear expectations, so important and hard to do. And one trigger or one understanding is when you have an upset or a frustration, instead of communicating your frustration or upset, figure out what was your expectation with regards to that, why that upset, and communicate your expectation. It has a big difference in terms of how it lands on the other side. And the last one, persuasive vision. How do you have a vision that people are excited to be a part of? And that, when you talk about inspiration, most of the time, that's the only thing that people talk about. Well, you have to have a vision. And it is important, but the vision has no impact if people aren't drawn to you because of who you're being. And that's why the last thing is the persuasive vision. So this program is a 90-day program. There's weekly coaching, because that delivers context and customized support. There's daily tips and encouragement through the app. Customized hot reminders. So part of what the app does is it helps you create customized reminders for your specific, what you're working on and when it's going to make a difference for you. Habit focused. So instead of doing a whole bunch of things, a whole bunch of different things, and at the end you did a whole bunch of things, you're focused on developing a habit. So by the end of the program, it's actually embedded into your routine. So it becomes easier. You don't have to think about it anymore. Peer support. Of course, if it's one-on-one coaching, you don't get peer support, but if even just 2 people makes a huge difference in terms of believe that it's possible. Engagement metrics, really measuring your progress and attaching that and understanding like this, yes, I'm taking action daily. And progress celebration. Most of the time when we're trying to do something new, we criticize ourselves about what we're not doing. And what we know about habit formation is that habits are formed for a craving, for a reward. And so when we're critical about what we're trying to do, it's antithetical to habit formation, because we actually have a negative association for what we're trying to do. So I force people to celebrate their progress daily, because that micro moment where they have to think about something positive creates that the likelihood and ease and speeds habit creation. So the expected outcomes of the program, of course, integrating and understanding the 9 core skills, improved mental health for the people who are participating in the programs, understand how to positively impact the mental health of others, reduce unwanted employee turnover, such an important thing, increased emotional intelligence and empathy, real comfort and effectiveness with performance conversations. Hopefully you got that, a part of that from today, and you'll practice doing that. And then understanding how to make sure you understand your personal and or organizational expectations. And lastly, of course, how to create and communicate